Trinity.
I'm Seamus.
I'm Antonia.
I'm Krisha.
I'm Luke.
I'm Opai.
Oh, lovely to meet you all. Hi, I'm Donovan.
Hi, Donovan.
We're going to be reading Tales of Aotearoa, How Māui Slowed the Sun. It's part of the New Zealand Book Awards for children's and young authors, picture book finalists, and we're going to be talking to the author, Donovan Bixley.
Cool. Is that my cue to intercede?
Yep.
Yeah. Kia ora everyone. It's lovely to be here. It's really great to have a nice little group. I got your list of questions, and may I say they're very good questions. Sometimes you don't get asked such good questions, but your questions are excellent. And I thought what I'd do is maybe talk a little bit about how I got into making books, and then talk specifically about making Maui. And then hopefully through that process, I'll answer some of your questions. And if I don't answer some of your questions, we can get to that at the end maybe. How does that sound?
Yeah.
All right. Okie dokie. So I'm just going to share my screen here. I'm going to go over to here. Ooh. Aha. Who's that handsome little fella? Look, I had blonde hair when I was little. That's me when I was a little fella. And I grew up in Taupo, which for those of you who don't know is right in the middle of the North Island where the big lake is. And you can see I was the type of person who was always getting into a bit of trouble. In fact, my family joked that I had 21 major trips to the hospital by the time I was 21. Broke both my legs twice, broke my arms, broke my nose twice, broke my ribs, had all my front teeth knocked out. I was used to get into a bit of trouble as a little fella, but one of the other things that I used to really love doing, apart from getting into trouble, is drawing pictures. And so this is a picture of me when I'm 3 years old. And this is the type of thing that I used to draw pictures of, like what a person would look like if they had a skeleton and what they might look like if they didn't have a skeleton. Silly things like that. But thankfully, I'm really pleased that you're all school librarians, because my mother was a school librarian and school librarians totally rock. And one day when I was 7 years old, my mum brought me home the book which completely changed my life, which was, believe it or not, it wasn't a kid's book, it was an adult book, and it was The Lord of the Rings. And it took my mum an entire year to read me The Lord of the Rings. And this is one of my pictures of Shelob from The Lord of the Rings. A bit more colourful than the version in Peter Jackson's movie. And you see the writing, it's really hard to read the writing there, but it says, this is Frodo being made into Kentucky Fried Frodo by Shelob. So two really important things happened when I was 7. My mum read me The Lord of the Rings, and Taupo got a Kentucky Fried Chicken. Major momentous event on the calendar of Taupo history. So I used to really love drawing pictures of especially all the monsters and stuff in Lord of the Rings. And then I'd go away and I'd write stories to go with my pictures. So the very first book I ever made, there we go, I'm just going to, where's my mouse gone? Oops. My mouse has disappeared. I can't use my mouse. Okay, oh yeah, here we go. This is I've got my little copy here of the very first book I ever made, which is a book I wrote when I was 8 years old. And believe it or not, it's a sequel to The Lord of the Rings. Much more thinner than The Lord of the Rings. Maybe I was just a much more efficient writer than Tolkien. It didn't take me 1,000 pages to tell my story. It only took me about 20 pages. Would you like me to read a little of it? So this is called The Return of the Balrog. Now, I could read it like a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old as I wrote it, because actually there's almost zero punctuation in this entire book. But if I do a little bit of editing as I read it and pretend that there's actually punctuation in there, it doesn't sound so bad. Because if I just read it as it's written, it's like, out of 20,000 men, 15,000 men had died. The gang left at 12 o'clock. They entered the forest of death in the late afternoon. Droopy dead trees stood everywhere. It just goes like that for the whole book. So I'm going to read you with punctuation. So this is The Return of the Balrog by Donovan Bixley. This is Chapter 4, The Forest of Death. Out of 20,000 men, 15,000 men had died. The gang left at 12 o'clock. They entered the forest of death in the late afternoon. Droopy dead trees stood everywhere. Spilt blood, arrows and skeletons were everywhere. The sun made long shadows. Suddenly, there was an ear-splitting scream, an orc. End of chapter 4. What chapter, eh? It's just like 1.5 pages. But the thing I really like about that, even though I'm only 8 years old, I'm taking something that I really love, The Lord of the Rings, and I'm borrowing a lot of the phrases and words that I've read Tolkien using in The Lord of the Rings, and I'm trying to reuse his words to write my own story. So things like, the sun making long shadows and the droopy dead trees. But the thing I really like, which I think is pretty good for an 8-year-old, is the last line, which is, suddenly there was an ear-splitting scream of an orc. What happened? Well, you have to turn the page to read the next chapter to find out what happened, which is, that's what storytelling's all about, is trying to make people want to turn the page. And I thought, that's far, far too clever for me to have come up with as an 8-year-old. And I must have stolen that idea from J.R.R. Tolkien. So that's how I got started. And that was the first book I've ever done. Somehow I find myself in this position now where I've done over 120 books published all around the world, translated into 18 different languages. And as you say, my book, How Māui Slowed the Sun, is in the Children's Book Awards this year, which is woohoo! It'll be my 8th time up for a Children's Book Award, so I'm really, really excited about that. But I thought, when I started making books as an adult, I was kind of not told, but it was kind of implied that I'd been doing things wrong my whole life. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to write the story first, and then you add the pictures later. Whereas when I was a kid, I used to draw pictures and then write stories to go with the pictures. But I kind of pretty much still do it the same way I did when I was 8 years old. So I still love just drawing pictures and then being inspired by pictures to write the stories. So this is... So after I've actually, let's say I draw you a picture. How does that sound? I'm going to go in. I'll show you what I mean. So, for example, when I was making Maui, the first thing that I do when I'm sitting down when I'm making a book is start thinking about what the character looks like. And of course, when we think of Maui, we think of a great warrior. So I was thinking, well, hang on, I'll just go like this. I'm just going to draw a quick picture of Maui. He's got big muscles. He's got what else has he got? He's pretty serious. He's got a pretty serious look on his face. He might have a big mullet out the back. Let's give him a big mullet. He's got to have some clothes on, but we'll give him a pew-pew. Give him some big muscly legs like a gymnast or something or other. Give him those kind of thighs like a bodybuilder has. What else does he need? He might need his special hook. And he also might need a six-pack or something or other. He might need some nipples. Otherwise, he looks a bit weird. We'll give him a whole bunch of tattoos on his arms and everything too. I always like making noises when I'm drawing pictures. These are just scribbly drawings, but... Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll give him some green tattoos. Like he's been... There we go. And we'll give him some tattoos like those ones they have on his legs and his backside and all over his arms. We'll just pretend that these scribbles I'm drawing are going to be really cool tattoos once I do finish painting. So there we go. We might want to give him, we could spend ages drawing picture of Maui. Look, we got, we'll give him some hairy arms, maybe give him some hairy legs. So there we go. There's a quick picture of Maui. So that was kind of like the first thing I did when I started, whenever I start thinking about a book, I start thinking about what the character looks like. And then that's really going to define for me what kind of book I write or what kind of story these characters might have. But as you may know, Maui isn't just this one-dimensional character. You know, this is what I've drawn here is what most people think of Maui as Maui Toa, Maui the warrior. But then I also started thinking about the other type of things. Maui has lots of other nicknames. So as well as being Maui Toa, the warrior, Maui is also Maui Tinihanga, which is Maui the cheeky trickster. And he's also Maui Pōtiki, which is Maui the scrawny little youngest brother. And once I started thinking about Maui being a cheeky trickster and the scrawny youngest brother, it really changed the way I wanted to tell the story. And I started drawing some different pictures, and I started drawing these pictures. So these are some of the characters I began to come up with when I started thinking of Maui as a small boy. And of course, once I started drawing Maui as a small boy, it really completely changed the way I thought about how the story would be told and what kind of interactions he would have with his brothers and his mother and the kind of adventures that he might go on. Of course, he's still going to achieve the same end result at the end of the story, but just how he does it is going to be a bit different. Would you like me to read you a little bit from the story?
Sure, please.
It's always, I think it might be interesting to hear the story read as the way the author intended it to be read. So I'll read you a little bit. I'll just read you the start of it. So this is Tales of Aotearoa, How Maui Slowed the Sun. Long, long ago, when Maui and his people first came to Aotearoa, the land was dazzling new with lush forests and wondrous creatures. Each morning, as the sun bounced into the sky, Maui would rise and hurry to begin his day. He was so full of ideas and things he wanted to do. On this morning, Maui was happily fishing at the rock pools with a brand new net he had woven from flax. Maui had just cast his kupenga into the water when suddenly the sun went down. Maui, it's past your bedtime. Oh, Mum, can I stay up? You can catch something or pawpaw tomorrow when the sun wakes up in the morning. But every day was the same. The sun would race across the sky just as fast as he could. And before Maui could finish what he was doing, it was bedtime again. Oh, it's not fair. The days are too short and there's so much to do. Then Maui had an idea. He called the whole village together. I'm going to slow the sun, Maui told everyone. His brothers burst out laughing. They said Maui was just a child. Maui, Pōtiki. It's impossible, little bro, said his eldest brother. Yeah, the sun's way hot, warned his second brother. It'll burn your clothes off, said the third brother. And you'll get a sunburnt nono, giggled his fourth brother. Maui stood tall and flashed his special hook before their eyes. I caught te ika Maui with this matou, he reminded them all. And they fell silent in awe, remembering how Maui had fished up the North Island of Aotearoa. I'm going to catch that speedy sun like a fish in a net. But first, said Maui, we're going to need heaps of harakiki. So there you go. That's just a little bit of the story. As you probably know, you've probably read it already. You probably know Maui's story from many, many different versions. And that was just a bit of my version. So maybe it might be, this could be a good opportunity to start answering some of your questions, and probably the most pertinent to what we were just talking about then is why did I decide to reinvent or retell this story? And I suppose the answer to that question, sorry, I'm answering your questions because I've also got them written down here. So, so I kind of asked that question for you. But I think one of the things that I was really thinking about when I was doing that book is that, you know, there was a lot of reaction to Disney's Moana movie and how Maui was portrayed in that movie. And I was personally thinking, that Maui is not our Maui that we have in Aotearoa. That Maui is kind of like an Americanized Maui, and it's kind of like Disney's version of Maui. But Disney doesn't own Maui. And you might be surprised to know that some places I've been to, I've been asked by people, did I have to pay copyright to Disney to do a book on Maui? It's like, well, as you know, Disney doesn't own everything in the world, and they certainly don't own all our myths and legends. And I initially just wanted to set off and make a book about Maui that related specifically to his version of the story here in Aotearoa. But I was kind of pretty worried about that because my publisher had asked me if I would do this book, and being a Pākehā guy, I thought, I don't really have the mana or the knowledge to be able to take on that kind of story. But I had this really good idea of how I would retell Maui's story and retell it from a child's point of view. And I thought, well, if I could hook up with some expert, some kaumātua who could give me some guidance, then I would do it. So I was really fortunate to meet up with Dr. Darryn Joseph, who's a senior lecturer at Massey University in Te Reo Māori, and he agreed to help me out, and so we kind of went from there. But I guess really hand in hand with that is the whole idea of this idea of reinterpreting Maui as a little boy, which had been an idea that had been in the back of my mind since I was probably your age. I'd read lots and lots of versions of Maui's stories and growing up with Maui's stories, and he's always kind of a little bit older. And when you're a kid, when I was growing up, and you see a picture of someone who's supposed to be a child, but they look like an adult to you, it doesn't really resonate with me, and especially when you think of the story of how Maui fished up the North Island. And he's supposed to, at one point in the story, he's supposed to go and hide in his brother's waka in the nighttime, and then they paddle out to sea and they find him in the boat. And in some versions of the story, Maui's like that picture of Maui that I drew at the start. He's like, whoa, he's this big muscly guy. And his brothers say, hey, Maui, how did you hide in our waka? Where were you hiding? And as a kid, I'd always be like, yeah, where was he hiding? Surely he was so massive, he couldn't have hidden anywhere in that boat. But so I guess that was really this massive impetus that had been the driver of this book for maybe 20, 30, 40 years. I'd had this thing in the back of my mind that Maui should be a little boy. So it's really funny after such a long time to finally do that. So there you go. I've sort of rabbited on enough about that question. Who's got another question?
So Chris, we were wondering if in the book before, in the old book, Maui, in the original version, Maui raised his grandmother's jawbone and struck the sun.
Yeah.
Is it intentional that he just said cool instead of hitting it, or was that just something that happened without you really thinking about it?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, because hand in hand with the whole idea of trying to bring Maui down to children's level, because I mean, you guys are a little bit older. This book is actually, I was actually setting out to make Maui's legend for maybe 5-6-year-olds, and but also with most of my books, I want to make a book that appeals to everyone, all the adults and teachers and the parents have to read it. And so hopefully there's going to be a lot of stuff in there for everyone to read, but especially since I was intending it for really young kids. You know, Maui's story, as you say, Maui's story can be, in a lot of places, it's quite, can be quite gruesome and a bit gory, like, as you say, in the traditional version of Maui's story, he kind of literally beats the snot out of the sun with his grandmother's jawbone with his special hook, and we kind of thought that wasn't really cool for a book for little kids. So we came up with the idea that maybe it's, you know, like sometimes when you watch a cartoon on TV and they go racing off screen and there's a whole bunch of crashes and bangs happening off screen. It's like the fighting's going on off screen. So we kind of came up with that idea that maybe the beating and the bashing was going to happen off the page, and that he just says cool it, as you say here, where he pulls out his grandmother's jawbone. But the thing was, like, working with my guidance, my Te Reo Māori guidance advisors, they said, well, you know, you can't actually take that out of the story. He does actually have to beat the son into submission. So it was actually my wife who came up with this line. She gets the son to say, oh, you've beaten old Tamanui Te Rā, which I guess, you know, can be taken either way. You can either say, oh, you've beaten me, or you've beaten me. You've literally beaten me to a pulp. So if you know the story and you know what's supposed to happen, that can fulfill that part. You would, I don't know if you've seen in the first book where Maui fishes up the North Island, we had a similar issue where it was really important. Maui has to use his own blood to fish up the North Island. He puts, and in many of the versions, he punches himself in the nose and then gets a big glob of blood and sticks it on his hook, which again, it's a little bit gory, especially, like I say, when I'm making a book for preschoolers and 5-6-year-olds. So in that version, we came up with this solution, which is kind of, you've got this guy here. He kind of gets an accidental elbow in the nose from his brother, and then in the background, he's got a little bit of trickle of blood coming out of his nose, and then on the next picture down here, the blood is on the hook. So it's not sort of putting it into people's faces, but it's not sort of saying, oh, Maui, you don't have to make it a massive part of the story and draw attention to it, but it's just a subtle thing in there in the background for the continuity of the legend and the importance of these things that have to happen in the story. So, yeah, good question. Who's got another question?
Why is there a dog in all of the pictures with Maui?
Well, I really like, actually, this is a really interesting question, because when I first did the story, there's somebody made the comment that I'd stuck a dog in because I was copying what Disney do in their movies. But actually, this is just I mean, for one, kids really like to have animal sidekick characters. You know, I think most kids like to have there's something that they can connect with, and aside from the human character. But actually, this is a tradition that goes back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, that you would have a character within the picture, within the play, who kind of is the moral compass of the story, kind of thing. You know, it's like you have this character who looks out at the audience and gives them the wink. So when Maui's about to go and do something bad or dodgy, or that he's going to make the wrong decision, the little dog gives us gives the reader a look and a wink and says, hang on, should he be doing that? So it's kind of just a way to have a little character in there who's giving the readers the clues as to whether Maui's doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Apart from the fact that I really like drawing animals. There was actually another comment I had when this book first came out too, which was that some people thought that adding a dog was specifically kind of like a Disney-style American type of thing to do, because they said, oh, well, Maori people didn't have dogs, which is actually completely wrong, because Maori people did bring dogs to New Zealand with them. And in fact, there's a great legend of Maui who makes the first dog. Unfortunately, he makes it out of his brother-in-law. So he turns his brother-in-law into a dog. So
We're going to have to get creative with that one to try to get that one into a book.
Yes, yeah. I'm not quite sure if I could make that one so child-friendly. Who's got another question?
Where did you get the inspiration for the style of art used in the illustrations?
Really, I just, what am I thinking? So what am I thinking? I mean, one, it's just the style of drawing that I like doing. If you look at a big page like this, as I say, lots of versions of Maui's story can be, like you say, can be a little bit dark. Some of the things he has to do are a bit dark, like punching himself in the nose and fishing up the North Island, and he goes off on this big mission to track the sun down and haul the sun, and then he beats up the sun. And sometimes the pictures in those books can be quite dark too. And I wanted to make a book that represented the New Zealand that I know when I go to the beach and when I look at the sky and the bright colours and the ferns and the foliage and the trees and the animals that we have here. So I really wanted to make a book that was bright and colourful and really friendly and approachable. So that's kind of like the reason behind the artwork. Who's got another question?
How long did it take you to write and illustrate the book?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Books generally, they're quite a long time. First of all, you have to think about the story, and then you have to do rough drawings. I've got some little. First of all, I start off making a little tiny book. I just make a tiny book. And I try and break down the story, sometimes just into single words. Something needs to happen. I need to be able to break the story into however many pages I'm going to break it into before I even really start thinking about the words I'm going to use. And then once I've got that sussed, then I make a slightly bigger book, and then I make a slightly bigger book. And some of them might have words in them and little speech bubbles and scribbles and drawings, and then I have to then I have to write it and actually write it. Once you've sort of figured out how the story is going to flow, you know that Maui sets out to slow the sun, and at the end he's slowed the sun and saved the day, or he's come to the conclusion. In the middle is a whole bunch of stuff, and so it's really just filling in all those points and deciding what you can have and what you can't have, because you've only got a limited number of pages. So some of the stuff I had to chop out, and some of the stuff I had to adjust so that I could fit it into the book. And the whole process of writing it probably takes about a month. It might actually only take me, 2 days to write a book, but then it might take me a whole month to just refine every little word, every little sentence, make sure that you're not wasting words. When you're writing a children's book, you want it to flow nicely, and you want every word to be meaningful, and you don't want to be saying the same thing over and over again. And then I have to do all the roughs, and that kind of takes me about 2 or 3 weeks. So that's just pencil drawings for the whole book. And then I have to do the final paintings, and that's the probably longest part, and that probably takes about 2 months to do that. So all in all, probably around about 4 or 5 months to do a book. Yeah, so that was a long, convoluted way of answering your question, but
How did it feel to be nominated for the New Zealand Book Awards for children and young adults?
oh, it's fantastic. I mean, there are a lot of children's books published in New Zealand. There's around 150, 160 children's books published every year in New Zealand. And so to be selected as one of the top 5 books in your category in the picture books section, that's really amazing that somebody out there noticed what you did and appreciated it. And for me, it's doubly good because this book has been really popular, so it's sold lots of copies. And so sometimes when you have something that's really popular, it doesn't really win an award because, you know, sometimes popular things are seen as being a bit too commercial. So, but it's really nice. I must have done something really good to have done something that's popular so that people like it, but also the awards judges and my peers also think it's really good too. So that's a great honour to be in the book awards out of so many books. As I say, this will be my 8th time in the book awards. I've won 3 times before. If I win this time, I'll be 50-50. I'll have a 50-50 hit rate. Who else has got a question? Any got any other questions?
You've written The Three Bears sort of, as well as Little Red Riding Hood not quite. Do you have a particular interest in remaking tales into a more modern story?
Okay, yeah, I illustrated those books. Actually, Yvonne Morrison wrote them, and both of those books were in the book awards too, and that was really fun. I think it's really, really fun to take something that's been done before and reinvent it. Often, you know, if you think of a lot of really famous artists, like say Shakespeare or Mozart or Leonardo da Vinci, and they would take old things and reinvent them in a new way. And I think it's really nice because you have the whole structure there already. Like I say, we know Maui's story. It's like he decides he's going to slow the sun because the sun's going too fast across the sky. But then, and at the end, he's achieved his goal. So what did he do in between the start and the end is kind of like a neat thing for a writer to muck around with, and as I say, like to reinvent him as a young person and reinterpret the story from a young person's point of view. For example, the first thing that came into my head, I just had this really great idea that the sun would, you know, it's like first thing in the morning and then the sun goes down and then he has to go to bed. I thought every kid in the world would associate with Maui having to go to bed early. It's like, but I don't want to go to bed. Kids never want to go to bed. So it is a lot of fun to take something that's been done. I mean, like Maui's story has been told thousands of times over thousands of years, and it will be told thousands of times again. And it's really fun to have a go at retelling a myth like that.
Well, I think you've pretty much answered all of our questions. So thank you for sitting down with us and answering all of our questions.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. I hope you had some fun. It's been great talking to you. And we'll catch you next time. Ka kite anō.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.